Well, welcome to a special edition of the Breakpoint podcast. I know we usually are teeing up another Q&A segment with me and Shane Morris. This is John Stonestreet, president of the Colson Center. But big news. Wow, big news. Yesterday was just about to get on a plane to fly home and saw the news, as did everyone else on Twitter, apparently at the same time. Of a Politico story announcing basically a leak of an early draft in this Dobbs case, which we've been talking about. A lot of people have been talking about for a long time, given his potentially historic significance when it comes to the issue of Roe v. Wade and abortion. There's so many layers to the story, it's hard to know where to begin. And so I am seeking help, first of all, from Erin Hawley. Erin is senior counsel to the appellate team at the Alliance Defending Freedom. When I hear stories like this, in fact, as I was racing between gates, I was texting Christian Wagoner, senior vice president at ADF, who will also be joining us at the Wilberforce weekend next week in Orlando, Florida, longtime friend, and saying, is this possibly legitimate? And she's like, I don't know. And here's what's happening. And everyone was kind of in it. And so Kristen pointed to Erin Hawley, who is our guest here on the Breakpoint podcast, to bring some sense to this. Erin also will be joining us at the Wilberforce weekend at our very special Thursday night event, Life After Roe. When we coined that event, Life After Roe, and we've got Stephanie Gray Connors, Kristen Hawkins from Students for Life, Jim Daly, Tim Tebow. When we put this event together, we did not schedule this particular leak to happen a week before. But here we are, Erin Hawley. First of all, let me just say thanks. We're real excited to have you. Your role in next week's event is to bring clarity to what the Dobbs decision could potentially be. Now we've got some sort of version, we think, of what it could potentially be. So we're going to give everyone a sneak peek here. So Erin Hawley, first of all, thanks for joining us here.
Thanks so much for having me. Delighted to be here.
So Erin, first of all, this leak happens. This seems shocking to most of us. You have a closer inside version. How shocking is this that a decision like this would be, or a version of the decision would be leaked like this?
Absolutely shocking, and probably even more shocking to those of us who have clerked at the court than to the general public. The court is sort of this sealed institution that for years has had a really high standard of not leaking. It would just be sort of untoward and incomprehensible that anyone would even speak to a reporter, much less leak an opinion. Every clerk takes an oath of confidentiality. And so I think those who are familiar with the Supreme Court and its practices are even more shocked that this opinion leaked. There's nothing that's happened like this before. And certainly we hope that nothing happens like this again.
So is there any possibility in your mind, I mean, having been a clerk at the U.S. Supreme Court, and who did you clerk with? I'm sorry, I should have known that information.
No, the Chief Justice Roberts.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, that gives you an inside look here of how things are actually handled. Is there any possibility that this document's a fake? It's 90 pages with 30 pages of footnotes.
Yes.
That's a heck of a forgery if somebody pulled that off.
Yes. And if you look at the opinion, I've had the chance to read it, the draft opinion, and it very much does read like an opinion that would have been written by Justice Alito. He's got some of his, catchy turns of phrase. It's very thorough. It completely debunks the idea that Roe or Casey are part of our tradition, our nation's tradition or history. And so I think it's a very well-written opinion. And I think its thoroughness and its sort of eloquence do suggest that it is probably a first draft from Justice Alito.
So I don't want to have you speculate too much because, there's been such a trend over the last 10 years for conservatives and progressives alike to see an initial story react and then be wrong. We're kind of allergic to that at the Colson Center. I mean, you can think about the Covington Catholic boys. The list goes on and on. Having been in the inside, who has access to these documents? I mean, I mean, so the dominant theory clearly on Twitter, which, is a dangerous place to get your dominant theory, is that it's a progressive justice. A lot of eyes are on particular justices. I don't want to go there because I think that is a step too far. But and you can speculate as much as you're comfortable speculating. But tell me, can you bring everyone's kind of going, how should I think about that? And you have a unique perspective, having been behind the scenes, even in the Chief Justice's chambers.
Sure, absolutely. So I think when you think about the court, there are three potential sources. The first is, as you mentioned, the justices. They obviously have the draft, as the draft mentions, that was circulated. It was sent presumably from Justice Alito's chambers to each of the other justices. Then, of course, you have the clerks. Each of the justices has 4 clerks. And then you have assistants and staff that help the justices run their chambers, sort of employees of the justices' chambers. So you've got these 3 different groups, each of whom might have had access to this opinion. Typically, one clerk is assigned to a case and will help the justice prepare for that case, prepare for oral argument, then discuss the case with them afterwards, see the draft opinion. Now, in this case, it's such a big case that I wouldn't be surprised if every clerk, wanted to see what the draft opinion said. And there's nothing wrong with that, that they're part of the Supreme Court. They're helping their justice in formulating the best opinion for the court. But somewhere here, something went badly off the rails. Again, every clerks of the court takes a oath of confidentiality. Nothing like this has ever happened before. So if it's a justice, that would be even more shocking. I think the relationship among the justices, despite, the heated 5-4 decisions that we see, in general, the justices have a very collegial relationship. You can think about the relationship between the late Justice Scalia and the late Justice Ginsburg. There's this great picture that used to be in her office of the two of them riding an elephant together. And even though they disagreed vehemently about issues, including abortion, they still had a respect for one another that, at least in their cases, I would never think that either of them would leak anything like this. And I think that hopefully can be said for the rest of the justices. So I don't know who leaked it, but it is very damaging to the court as an institution. It's unprecedented, and as big as the story is over Roe, this issue of a leak at the court is just as big.
You're right. I mean, it's a absolutely huge story, which is so difficult because we've been waiting for this decision. We have, those of us that have been in the pro-life movement for any period of time whatsoever, this is a historic decision, that we have been waiting on. It had a potential that no other decision before it had. And that's really why we asked you to join us next week down in Orlando for our special Life After Roe event there at the Rosen Shingle Creek. If you're in the Orlando area, Florida area, especially now, given we have a little bit of a window into what might be coming from the court, and I think it's important. You can help us here with procedure. So let's start here. This is not a decision being issued. This is a draft being leaked. What's the difference?
Absolutely. That's a great point. And if you look at the date on the draft that was leaked, it's February 10th. So that was a couple of months ago. And so what typically happens in a Supreme Court case is a justice who is in the majority is assigned the case. It seems like the Chief Justice might be somewhere in the middle. Again, that's speculation. I hope that he votes to overrule Roe in full. But if Justice Thomas was the most senior justice on the majority, then he would have assigned that opinion, presumably from the leak, to Justice Alito. Justice Alito would have then worked for months to prepare that first draft opinion. And then that would have circulated, as we saw, to each of the chambers. Then you've got sort of 2 different things that takes place at the court. One, those who are on the other side, the dissent, start working on their dissent. They were probably already working on it and responding to the majority. But those justices who joined Justice Alito in voting to overturn Roe also have a chance to look at the opinion and say, I really like that, or could you tweak this language a little bit, or I'm not sure about this paragraph. And so there's this internal opinion building process that takes place, especially in cases like this, where the draft will change over time, sometimes substantially, sometimes not much at all. And then you often see other justices writing concurrences. So maybe they want to be stronger on a particular point. So you could see Justice Thomas or Justice Gorsuch writing an opinion saying, look at this issue in addition. So there's lots of sort of dynamic, collaborative opinion writing that goes on in addition to the draft we saw.
What do you think? I'm just tempted to say, what is Justice Alito thinking this morning as he wakes up? I mean, I know that's too much conjecture, but there's got to be just a seismic shock among Supreme Court justices that this was an unthinkable sort of possibility, and now it happened.
Absolutely. So the entire court, I think, was completely shocked that an opinion was leaked, especially one of this magnitude. That has such an effect on democracy in our country. And if you look at Justice Alito's opinion, he just does a great job. Again, presumably Justice Alito's opinion, we think it's legitimate, but of course the court has not issued its official opinion. But he marches through the history of Roe and of Casey and explains how those courts' decision was not grounded in anything constitutional. There's no right to an abortion in the Constitution's text, structure, or history. Justice Alito dismantles sort of this historical idea that there's some right to abortion that can be found in the common law. He notes that Roe overturned nearly every law, or a pro-life law, I should say, in nearly every single state. So it's a really thorough debunking that the right to abortion is grounded anywhere in our Constitution. So I hope he's thinking that he's proud of his opinion, but I'm sure mostly he is shocked that it is, every law professor in the country is going to have the chance now to take sort of pot shots at it because it's out there before it's final, and so that's probably a little frustrating. But it's a very well done opinion.
Well, you have looked more closely at the Dobbs case than anyone else at ADF. You're kind of the pointed to expert. You have been a part of several public panels and events on this and watched it so closely. So let's talk about that, because Alito's opinion, and thank you, by the way, for reading it. God bless you. I don't know how late you were up last night. What a long opinion. You guys are nerdy junkies, and man, you did it. You pulled it off. Congratulations. But one of the historic parts of the Dobbs case was that the state of Mississippi decided to not only argue for the validity of its law, but to argue against the validity of Roe v. Wade. So you read then Alito's opinion. Could it, based on what, again, it's an early draft, is it everything that you hoped it would be?
If you look at the opinion, I think it does a really good job of explaining why Roe is found nowhere. There's no right to an abortion in constitutional text, structure, or history. It marches through the scientific developments that science has changed a lot since 1973. It talks about, as Justice Barrett did, oral argument about safe haven laws. And so this idea that having a family can be a burden to women, while a lot of us think it's a blessing, also recognizing that adoption is a very viable option in all 50 states. So the opinion sort of has a couple of parts. It looks first, is there any historical right to abortion? Is it deeply rooted in our nation's tradition and history, as the court's precedents require? And that answer is clearly no. Then the opinion talks about stare decisis. And the idea basically is, even if Roe is wrong, even if Casey is wrong, should we still uphold them anyway? And says there's no reason to uphold Roe and Casey, even though they're wrong. They march through sort of the factors of reliance. And one thing Justice Alito's opinion focuses on is the damage that the so-called right to abortion and the court's finding of it in Roe and Casey have done to this country. And in essence, because the Constitution doesn't say anything about about abortion. It is an issue that's left to the people and to the states to the power to protect life. And as even Justice Ginsburg said, and I think she gets a shout out in the opinion, Justice Ginsburg called Roe a heavy-handed judicial intervention that provoked rather than sort of diminished public backlash. And so it's this idea that the court took to itself, aggrandized to itself, this issue that belonged with the people. So it's been damaging to our democracy. It's damaging to our institutions and to the court. And so there's no reason to stick to it.
Yeah. Well, the stare decisis point is incredibly important because everyone wants stare decisis if it's an opinion or a position that they historically agree with. But as I understand it, there was that was a heavily footnoted section pointing out all the different places, or maybe not all the different places, but many of the different times through history that SCOTUS has overturned itself.
That's such a great point, John. And if you look, Justice Alito sort of tongue-in-cheek actually notes that Casey, in fact, overruled several prior abortion cases and overruled Roe in part. And then he talks in particular about a number of opinions of the court, including Brown versus Board, which overruled cases. So some of our very most important decisions coming from the Supreme Court have been those in which the court overruled a past erroneous decision. And there's this one great footnote. I hope it stays in there. I think it runs like a page and a half, and it lists all of the cases in which certain that have overruled other cases. So you're absolutely correct. Stare decisis is not, as the court says, an inexorable command, but rather it bows when a decision is egregiously wrong and as harmful as Roe and Casey.
So again, to be clear, this is an early draft of an opinion that looks legit because a forgery like that would be an accomplishment if somebody could pull that off. So it looks like that, but it's not the decision. The decision is not until the final decision is not until the final opinion is released. So to be clear, but if this happens to be the lane that this opinion lands in, let's be really clear on what it means and what it doesn't mean. So what does this mean for abortion? That's an important question given, I was flipping back and forth on the TV screen there in the airplane last night between MSNBC and Fox News and CNN. It's like watching different planets, you don't even know. But certainly heard people say, bring out the Handmaid's Tale reference, which I'm so tired of hearing. I could just, bang my head against the wall. You hear the ban abortion, you hear the criminalize abortion language. So let's be really clear. What does this mean and what does it not mean?
So the draft opinion is really clear, and it will just return to the states the ability to discuss these issues, to debate them, to Justice Ginsburg criticized the decision for short-circuiting democratic debate. And once the court handcuffs of Roe and Casey are off, it will be up to the people. It's really up to all of us to debate and discuss this issue in our state legislatures with our representatives, and for the issue to be one for the people. So it's going to return that issue, the issue of abortion, to the states. As Justice Alito said, people disagree on that, and it's one that the court should stay out of. And if Roe is overturned, the court will no longer be in the business of legislating abortion, but rather states, state by state, will be able to adopt restrictions, will be able to protect life. And you'll probably, quite frankly, see some states like California and New York that will continue to have very liberal abortion laws. And I think one of the things that's misunderstood about Roe, Roe and Casey talk about balancing the interests. But there's no balancing that goes on. It restricts states like Mississippi from protecting life at the very reasonable age, the very modest age of 15 weeks, when a baby can smile, she can hiccup, she can move and stretch and likely feel pain. And under Roe and Casey, Mississippi cannot protect her. And yet, under Roe and Casey, states like not Mississippi, states like California and New York can permit abortion up until the moment of birth. And so, if this opinion comes to be, if the Supreme Court reverses Roe, that will be off the playing field, and states like Mississippi will be able to protect life.
So this becomes a state issue. At the same time, Bernie Sanders last night quickly tweeted out that it's time to overturn the filibuster, to codify abortion rights through the legislature. Is that a legislative possibility? That seems also to create this cascading kind of set of effects, in terms of how to, including having to overturn a filibuster in order to get there.
Yeah, so I think that's a really tricky proposition for the Senate, especially as currently composed.
Right.
It's equally split 50-50. So I don't see that going anywhere right now. And I think it does return to the states in the first instance, and states will be able to protect life. And it really is the case in which, all of us should be engaged and involved in these discussions and putting forward our views that every life merits protection and is valuable to God. And if Roe's gone, we can do that more effectively in those states.
There's so much here that you just said. We could just unpack that for a really long time, which is we're here not because the court made a decision, but because the people came to marches and people showed up at pregnancy resource centers and volunteered, and arguments were formulated by academic elites that then trickled down through popular apologists to help everyday people have the conversations, as Chuck Colson used to say, over the backyard fence and around the barbecue grill. And that continues. That doesn't, we could never rely on the Supreme Court to do our job. The Supreme Court had to do its job. And we got a glimpse into it. We pray that this is where it's headed, and that means they will have done their job. But that doesn't mean that our job is over. And our job then continues. And if we can't expect the state legislators to do our job either. They're going to do their job. We have to do our job so that they can do their job. And that's why I'm so excited about the timing of this event next week down in Orlando, Florida. I'm so excited, Erin, to have you as a part of this panel. You brought so much clarity even here. I mean, I just can't believe you read that thing in the last 12 hours. And, your ability to just say, okay, it's crazy in this room. Here's everything that's happening was just so helpful today. So thank you for doing that so quickly. Thank you for joining us next week. Again, that's next Thursday, May the 12th, at the Rosen Shingle Creek Resort in Orlando, Florida. Erin Hawley here from ADF will be with us, as well as Kristen Hawkins from Students for Life. She'll be talking about what that strategy is, what our job is. That's what she does as well as anyone. Stephanie Gray Connors, who's one of those apologists that I mentioned, she will be talking about these kind of slogans that get thrown around. The Handmaid's Tale slogan. This is an attack on women's health care. This is an attack on women's rights. She'll help us address each and every one of those slogans. Jim Daly, who talks about celebrating life, and he celebrates life at Focus on the Family as well as anybody. And then, of course, the one and only Tim Tebow, who will be Tebowing. We'll just put it that way. That's what he'll be doing. So it's be a great event. And what an amazing timing this is. And we hope you guys can join us. And Erin, so grateful for you to join us. Senior counsel for the appellate team at the Alliance Defending Freedom, nose on the ground here on this opinion on the Dobbs case, on the ruling, on where the legal standing is when it comes to abortion in America. You've been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.